He married me thinking I was a harmless girl in a silk dress. But I was the storm that learned how to smile. What I did on our wedding night changed everything. If you're ready for a love story laced with secrets, betrayal, and one impossible choice, tap like. Hit subscribe. This is not the kind of story you forget. The first thing I noticed about the Lancaster estate wasn't the silence. It was the smell. Old stone and cedar wood, soaked with rain and memory. The kind of scent that clings to the skin long after you've walked away, if you're lucky enough to walk away. I wasn't planning to. Not yet. I stood alone in the study that night, barefoot on the Persian rug, wearing the dress they'd chosen. For me, ivory silk, too expensive, too tight at the ribs. It didn't belong to me. Neither did the name stitched on the invitation cards. Claire Holt, a woman they thought was quiet, well-mannered, and sufficiently invisible to marry a man, like William Lancaster. But that wasn't who I was. Not to him. Not to me. Not to the woman buried under a maple tree in a town no one remembers. I married William Lancaster earlier that day. I smiled for the camera, signed the paper, and slid the ring onto my finger with the same care one might use to arm a grenade. He didn't kiss me. He didn't need to. He'd already won. Or so he thought. The room still held the weight of his presence, air taut with restraint. A glass of champagne sat untouched on the mantel. The fireplace glowed low, but the cold in the room had nothing to do with temperature. It was the kind of cold you carry in your blood. I reached beneath the folds of my gown and retrieved the small flash drive sewn into the lining. A thin line of sweat had formed along my spine during dinner. I wondered if he noticed. He noticed everything. Except me. Perfect. The drawer of his desk clicked open too easily. No lock, no security, only arrogance. I slid the USB into the back of the computer and let the file transfer begin. Folder names flickered across the screen. Internal audits, legal memos, acquisition records. My hands didn't shake. They'd stopped shaking 10 years ago. The rain had started again outside. I stepped onto the veranda, barefoot, the stone cold beneath my feet. The estate stretched out below me, acres of manicured gardens I'd once run through when I was 12, and called this place work. Back then, my mother wore a navy blouse and smelled of jasmine tea. She kept books in her apron pockets and told me stories while folding sheets in the servants' quarters. She died with her name erased from every record Lancaster Group ever owned, all because she spoke up. All because she believed the truth had value. Believed in something else now. Leverage. The door creaked behind me. I turned. William stood in the doorway, loosened tie, sleeves rolled to the forearms. No smile, no questions, just those impossibly still gray eyes, like a storm held in glass. "Thought you'd be asleep," he said. "I'm not much for ceremony." "Neither am I." We stood there, two silhouettes in the half-light, married in name but nothing more. Strangers, legally bound by a contract written in silence. He stepped forward, picked up the untouched champagne, then paused. "Was it everything you imagined?" he asked, voice dry, like a match before the flame. I didn't flinch. "I imagined less people," I said, "and less smiling." He gave a soft, tired exhale that could have been a laugh, or not. Then he nodded toward the hallway. "Your room is next door. I had it prepared. Unless you prefer to play the part." It wasn't a question. It was a dare. I didn't rise to it. I only said, "You didn't marry me for affection." "No," he said. "I married you for convenience. And because you ask nothing of me." I met his gaze and let the silence stretch. Then, "And what if I do?" He tilted his head, just slightly. Calculating. Then I'd start to wonder who you really are." He left without another word. His footsteps faded into the long corridor of his grandfather's house, where every portrait seemed to watch me and wait for my mask to slip. I stood there a while longer, listening to the rain. The wind carried the faint scent of jasmine, or maybe it was just memory playing games. Then I went to bed alone. Not because I was unwanted, because war takes planning. And in the morning I would smile like a good wife. I would sip tea and ask about board meetings. I would press my hand lightly to his chest before he left for work, and he would never know how close he was to having his empire pulled out from under him. But tonight, I lay in a bed the size of a lie, staring at the ceiling, and I thought, not for the first time, I married you to bury you, but I wonder who'll end up beneath the dirt. Her hair was the color of dying autumn, deep, unruly red with streaks of gold that only showed in the sun. People remembered that first. Not her name, not her voice, not the way she made coffee in silence while humming a Chopin nocturne. No, just the hair. They called her the redhead in the accounts department, until the day she disappeared from the office. After that, she was the woman who couldn't keep her mouth shut. I was 14 when she died. I was the one who found her. But that's not where this story begins. It begins in a conference room, 10 years ago, when Evelyn Holt walked into a Lancaster board meeting with a folder full of audit discrepancies and a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. She was a junior accountant then. A widowed single mother, brilliant with numbers, invisible in rooms that mattered. She had discovered something buried, hidden adjustments in quarterly reports that painted the company richer than it was. A fraud trail. Quiet, systematic, designed to inflate stock value before a major merger. She thought bringing it forward was the right thing, that someone would thank her. Instead, they shredded her report, silenced her, forced her to sign an NDA under the threat of litigation. When she refused, the HR department let her go for breach of confidentiality. And just like that, 20 years of spotless work unraveled in one cold email. Her name vanished from the internal directory. Her emails stopped working. Her desk was emptied while she was still in the building. And William Lancaster? He was there. Executive Vice President. At the time, he watched it all. Did he pull the trigger? No, but he didn't stop it either. After she died, no one from the company sent flowers. No one from her department came to the funeral. It rained that day, cold spring drizzle on the tin roof of the church. There were 7 people in attendance. I remember because I counted them. I remember everything. The smell of her pillow, the chipped mug she used every morning, the exact words on the letter she left. Claire, don't let them write the ending for you. They ruled her death a suicide. No one questioned it. No one asked what a woman with no history of depression, no medications, no prior attempts, was doing hanging from the beam of the old barn behind our rented house. They just nodded, shrugged. Buried her like a closed file. I was placed in temporary care, shuffled between houses, names, bedrooms that didn't smell like home. It was a retired seamstress named Nora who finally took me in, gave me back something like stability, taught me to sew, taught me to read contracts, taught me what people look like when they lie. I changed my name at 17, applied to colleges under a different social security number, took a job in a tailor shop under the alias Claire Holt, moved to Vermont. Close enough to watch the house on the hill, far enough not to be noticed. And I waited. Waited for the right moment, for the right scandal, for the right man with the right weakness. That moment came when William Lancaster's board threatened to remove him unless he stabilized his public image. He needed a wife, and I offered to become her. People think revenge looks like fire, screaming, fury, But revenge is cold, meticulous. It sits quietly in the corner of your life, sewing its thread through every choice you make until it becomes part of you. I didn't smile when William proposed. He didn't kneel. It wasn't a ring I wore. It was a target, a password. I didn't want his love. I wanted his files. They say he cried when his wife died. Not me. The one before me. It was an accident. A car crash on an icy bridge. Her name was Elise. I've seen her pictures. She had soft eyes and a clever smile. She used to teach literature at the university. I wonder if she saw the rot underneath all that marble and legacy, or if she loved him in a way I never could. It doesn't matter. She's not here, and I am. Tonight, I stood again at the window of our bedroom, my bedroom, the room I chose not to share. I stared at the pine trees, their silhouettes leaning like old secrets in the wind. My mother once told me, "The world won't hand you justice, Claire. You'll have to make it." So I am. But why then does it feel like the closer I get to justice, the further I drift from peace? I crawled into the cold bed and pulled the silk sheet over my chest. In the room next door, I heard him cough. Just once. A human sound. Unguarded. Too honest for a man like him. I hated how my heart noticed. "You think you're strong," I whispered into the dark. "But you haven't seen what loss turns people into." He would see. Soon. There were 37 doors in the Lancaster house. I counted them in the first week of marriage, not out of boredom, but out of habit. The same way soldiers map their trenches, or mice test the walls of their cages. William never noticed. Or maybe he did, and chose not to ask. That was our arrangement after all. We didn't speak unless we had to. He rose at 6, left at 7, returned at dusk. I learned his rhythms the way a thief learns the footsteps of a guard. He drank his coffee black, without sugar. He read the newspaper in print, not online. He never once asked where I went during the day, though he must have known I was exploring, the house room by room, cataloging its corners, its histories, its ghosts. The house was old, older than him. Built by his grandfather in 1918 and left nearly untouched. It smelled of leather and time. The floorboards creaked in places, but no one ever fixed them. The paintings on the walls were of people who looked like they hadn't smiled in generations. The air held silence like a precious thing. In the mornings, I passed him in the kitchen. He'd nod, hand me the sugar if I reached for it. At night, we sat in the same room reading different books. Sometimes I watched him when he wasn't looking, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to understand what kind of man could let a woman like my mother fall without blinking. He didn't seem cruel, but he didn't seem kind either. He seemed resigned, as though the world had handed him a role long ago, and he never questioned if he wanted to play it. One night, the hallway light flickered. I went to the fuse box in the cellar. He hadn't noticed. I reset the switch, walked back up the narrow stairs barefoot, my dress brushing the wooden rail. He was standing at the top. "You know the way around better than I do," he said. I shrugged. I remember places. It slipped out before I could catch it. His eyes narrowed. "You've been here before?" I looked past him, not at him. "No, but old houses feel the same." He didn't believe me. But he let it go. That was another thing about William Lancaster. He collected unspoken things. He filed them away like reports no one wanted to see, waiting for the right moment to open them again. On the 4th night, I couldn't sleep. Rain tapped the window. The fireplace in the study still crackled low. I wandered down the hallway, passing closed doors like tombstones. Then I found it. A room I hadn't noticed before. No label, no lock, just slightly ajar, as if waiting. Inside, a game of chess, frozen mid-play. Dustless, 2 chairs, a teacup on the side table, long emptied, but not cleaned. I stepped closer. The board told a story. White had just sacrificed its queen. Black was positioned to win, but hadn't moved yet. I touched the black bishop. It was Elise's room, came his voice from the doorway. I startled. He didn't move. She liked puzzles, he said. Always left games unfinished. Said it gave her something to return to. I turned. His face was unreadable in the shadows. Not sad, not sentimental, just still. Did she ever finish this one? No, he said. I never moved after her last play. A silence fell between us, soft and heavy like dust on velvet. She sounds like someone worth loving, I said. She was. And then, as if realizing he'd said too much, he turned and left. That night, I dreamed of my mother for the first time in years. She was folding bed sheets in the sun, her red hair pinned up, her hands smooth and certain. She looked at me and said nothing, just kept folding. I woke with her name in my mouth and tears on the inside of my throat. In the morning, I found William in the sunroom, reading. The light made him look younger, though his eyes betrayed time. I'm going to the market, I said, not asking permission. He nodded. Take the town car. I paused. I prefer walking. A flicker of surprise in his eyes. Then, suit yourself. That was our language. Short, blunt, controlled. But something in his voice that morning wasn't like before. Less armor. More space between the syllables. When I returned, there was a cup of tea on my nightstand. Still warm. Jasmine. No note, no explanation, only the scent, like memory pretending it had never left. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it. William Lancaster didn't strike me as a man who did anything by accident, and jasmine wasn't a common choice. My mother drank jasmine tea every morning. He wouldn't know that, couldn't know that. No. I buried the thought before it grew roots. This wasn't sentiment. This was coincidence. It had to be. And yet, when I lifted the cup to my lips, my hands trembled. Not from guilt, not from love, but from something far more dangerous. Doubt. The fire had burned low again. It always did around this hour. Between 9 p.m. and the hour neither of us would admit, was loneliness. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft crackle of the logs and the occasional shift of his page-turning fingers. William was reading the Wall Street Journal, or pretending to. I was embroidering a line of invisible stitches along the hem of a silk napkin, just to keep my hands busy. We hadn't spoken in an hour. We hadn't needed to. Some people argue to fill the silence. We sat inside it. And that night, for reasons I didn't fully understand, I broke it. You kept her room untouched. His eyes didn't leave the page. I keep many things untouched. Because you miss them? I asked. This time he looked up. There was no irritation in his gaze, no defensiveness, just that unnerving stillness he wore like tailored wool. Because I respect the weight of absence, he said. The fire popped behind us, throwing flickers of gold across the polished floor. I let my needle rest. That sounds like a line you've rehearsed, I said. He almost smiled. Almost. You think I rehearse everything? I think you rehearse grief better than most people live. A pause. You speak like someone who's known it, he said. Quiet, not accusing. Just Curious. I buried my mother in spring, I replied. No one came, not even the people she worked with for 20 years. William's eyes shifted, just slightly. A flicker of recognition? No. I told myself no. What did she do? He asked. She counted things, I said. Mistakes, hours, the number of ways people pretend not to see. Another silence stretched between us, longer, heavier. Then he did something I didn't expect. He closed the paper, folded it with perfect symmetry, set it on the side table. Come sit closer, he said. I hesitated. The man I'd studied, approached, married, and planned to destroy, had just invited me into something I couldn't name. Not intimacy, not trust, just space. Shared space. Moved to the edge of the chair opposite him. Not close, just less distant. Your mother, he said slowly. Was she angry before she died? I didn't answer right away. I stared into the fire, as if it could tell me. No, I said finally. She was tired. And she was proud. And she was quiet. Until she wasn't. He nodded, as if that meant something to him. My father. One said silence is how legacy survives, he murmured. But silence has cost me more than noise ever did. It was the first time I heard him speak without control. Not scripted, not careful, just human. There were so many things I could have said then. So many questions I could have asked. Why didn't you help her? Did you know what they did to her? Do you ever regret not speaking up? But I said none of them. Because the truth was, I didn't know if I wanted the answers. I was afraid they wouldn't match the enemy I'd built in my head. Tell me something honest, he said suddenly. The request landed like glass on wood. Why? I asked. Because you've been lying beautifully since the day we met. And I want to know if you still know how to be ugly. I blinked, then said, I didn't cry at her funeral. He looked at me, waited. I wanted to, I added. But there was a part of me, ashamed maybe, that felt relieved, because her story ended before it could rot further. William leaned back slightly, eyes unreadable. That's not ugly, he said. It felt ugly. No, it felt real. We didn't speak for a while after that. Not out of discomfort, but out of a strange, unspoken agreement. Like something had shifted and neither of us knew what to do with the new weight of it. Then he asked, Did she love you well? Yes, I said. But she didn't teach me how to survive without her. His expression softened, not visibly, but inwardly. I felt it, like a gust of wind through a tightly shut window. I never knew how to survive with someone, he said. Elise made it look easy, but I failed her, in ways that have no language. A small flame inside me flickered, dangerously close to sympathy. I tamped it down. Sympathy was how traps lost teeth. Before I stood to leave, he said, You're not what I expected. Neither are you, I replied. He nodded. But one of us is lying. I didn't disagree, and I didn't look back. Later that night in my room, I found another cup of jasmine tea on the nightstand, still warm. This time, I didn't drink it. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't ready to feel anything yet. And I could sense, the moment I let it in, I wouldn't be able to control what followed. It started with a sound I wasn't meant to hear. A drawer slamming shut. Harder than necessary. Wood against wood. Sharp. Final. I stood in the hallway, half in shadow, holding the handle of my door, debating whether to enter or keep listening. Then I saw him. William, standing in his study, back rigid, jaw clenched. He'd found it. The USB I thought I'd hidden well enough. Not in the drawer. Not anymore. My breath stopped. He didn't turn. Instead, he spoke to the window like it was safer than me. "You think I don't notice," he said. "But I see everything. Claire." I stepped forward slowly. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Then you know why I came." He finally turned. The storm in his eyes wasn't rage. It was betrayal tempered by exhaustion. Like someone who'd lost so many times, this final blow wasn't shocking anymore. "I knew you had secrets," he said, "but I didn't think you'd use my bed to bury them." I laughed, bitter and low. "You think I used your bed? We haven't even shared one." "That wasn't my choice." "No," I said. "It was mine. Because I didn't want to wake up beside the man who ruined my mother." There it was. The line I'd never dared to speak aloud. The truth that uncoiled like smoke between us. His silence lasted 5 seconds, maybe 6. Then he walked toward me, measured, unhurried, dangerous. "Say that again," he said. I met his eyes. I should have flinched. I didn't. "You let her drown, and you stood on the shore." He stopped inches from me. His hand flexed at his side, like he wanted to hit something or hold something, but couldn't decide which. "She was collateral," I spat. "Your board made her a scapegoat and you signed the paperwork." His voice dropped. "You don't know what I signed?" "No," I said. "But I know what it cost her, and what it made me." "What did it make you?" he asked, low and sharp. "Cold," I said, "calculating, just like you." And then, like magnets snapping out of their cages, we collided. No permission, no hesitation. His hands found my arms, not to hurt, but to hold, tightly, as if anchoring himself to the only person who dared break him open. I didn't resist, because I needed to hurt him. Because I needed to feel him break. Because I didn't know what else to do with everything burning under my skin. Our mouths met like war. Not grace. His kiss wasn't gentle. Mine was punishing. He pressed me against the wall. I pulled him closer, grabbed the collar of his shirt, yanked. Buttons popped. His breath caught when my nails scraped his back. He retaliated by dragging his fingers down the zipper of my dress. Not careful, not delicate, just decisive. The silk fell. So did the mask. We weren't husband and wife. We were wound and blade. He carried me across the room like a man too proud to beg, but too broken not to hold on. The bed creaked under us, unfamiliar territory now claimed. No words, no pretense, just skin, tension, fire. My thighs wrapped around, his hips as if to trap the anger, the memory, the failure between us. He tasted like regret, like rain on ash. When I gasped, it wasn't from pleasure. It was from how raw it felt to need someone I hated. When he moaned, it wasn't from lust. It was the sound of something caving in. Afterward, we lay tangled in sweat and sheets, not touching. His back to me, my arm across my eyes. The room smelled like heat and rain, and whatever truth people only confess with their bodies. I waited for guilt, for triumph. Neither came, only a silence too heavy to move through. "I should hate you more than I do," I whispered into the dark. He didn't respond, but I felt him breathe, slow, ragged, human, and I knew. We'd just destroyed something, but I wasn't sure which of us would survive it. He wasn't in bed when I woke up. Not that I expected him to be. The side where William had lain was cold, tidy, like nothing had happened, like we hadn't torn into each other just hours ago. Trying to win a war we didn't have the courage to name. I sat up slowly. My legs ached. My chest was sore. And my mind was no longer certain who the villain was in this story. I reached for the robe on the bedpost, wrapped it around me, and stepped out into the hallway. His door was ajar. His study was empty. But on his desk, neat as always, was a sealed envelope, white, unmarked, waiting. I stared at it for a full minute before picking it up. It wasn't addressed, but it didn't need to be. Inside, 2 sheets of paper. The first, an original employment file from Lancaster Group dated 2012, employee, Evelyn Holt, II, my school transcript. The real one. From before I changed my name. Before I erased who I was. I didn't read them. I didn't have to. He knew. He'd known for days. Weeks, maybe. And he hadn't said a word. I carried the envelope to the veranda and sat down on the old, wicker chair facing the garden. It was early. The fog hadn't lifted. The trees looked half erased. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I didn't know what to do with the part of me that felt. Seen. He found me an hour later. I didn't turn when I heard his footsteps, but I felt them. Felt him. You left your answers out in the open, I said. I thought you deserved them, he replied. I looked over my shoulder. He was dressed simply, dark, sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows, face bare of expression. You've known all along, I said. He nodded. Since the week before the wedding, I laughed, humorless. Why the hell did you marry me? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, he said. And because... He paused. The word caught in his throat. Because I thought, maybe you needed a door you didn't have to break through. That stopped me cold. You thought I needed help? I asked, voice sharp. No, he said. I thought you needed choice. You had none when they destroyed your mother. And maybe, just maybe, this time, I could give you one. His voice didn't tremble, but something beneath it did. I stood up, clutching the robe tighter. I was going to ruin you, I said. I still can. You could, he said. But you won't. Don't be so sure. I'm not, but I've seen the look in your eyes. Last night when you touched me like you were trying to disappear inside your own skin. He stepped closer. You don't want to destroy me, he said. You want me to understand. I backed away, just one step. That's not true. I lied. Then why didn't you use the file? I still might. He didn't respond. Only watched me with that maddening stillness of his, like he knew exactly where I'd break and was willing to wait. I hated him for it. But I hated myself, more, for not hating him enough. I never touched your mother, he said. I froze. Not like that, he clarified. We were colleagues. I admired her. She was smarter than most of the board. I didn't stop what happened because I was too new, too careful, too afraid to lose what little power I had. He exhaled. A long, hollow sound. But I never forgot. Her. Silence settled over us like dust. Then I whispered. I thought you were the man who let her drown. And now? I don't know, I admitted. But I don't recognize the one standing in front of me either. He nodded once, as if that was the answer he expected. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive. My flash drive. He placed it in my palm without a word, and walked away. I sat back down in the chair. The weight of the tiny object was unbearable. Not because it was heavy, but because it meant he'd already given me the power I came to steal. He gave it willingly. I held his secrets, but he held mine first. And now, I didn't know whose were more dangerous. That night I stood in front of the fireplace, the USB in one hand, a match in the other. I lit it, watched the flame curl, then swallowed the edge of the drive's label. But I didn't drop it into the fire. Not yet. Because there was still one thing I didn't understand. And I couldn't burn the evidence until I knew. Did I ever matter to him at all? Or was I just another unfinished game on a chessboard he never learned to play? The match burned faster than I expected. It licked up the edge of the folded label like a hungry tongue. Lancaster Group. Internal Audit 2014. That title alone had once kept me awake at night, burning through my bloodstream like wildfire. Now it made my hand tremble, not because it held power, but because I no longer wanted to wield it. The fireplace crackled behind me. One more inch and the drive would drop in. I could end it, just like that. No witnesses, no war. But I didn't. Not yet. Because part of me still wanted to know. Who was I without the revenge? I walked out to the veranda barefoot. The boards were cool, slick with dew. Morning hadn't fully arrived. The sky was blue-gray, like a bruise beginning to fade. The air smelled like pine and old promises. The flash drive was still in my hand, unburned. I sat in the same wicker chair where William had found me days ago, when everything was still calculated. Strategic. I had been in control then. Now I didn't even know what side of the line I was on. I heard his steps long before I saw him. William never rushed. Even when everything else was falling apart, he moved like the world bent around him, not the other way. He stopped in the doorway behind me. "I thought you might be here," he said. "I thought you might stop me," I replied, holding up the matchbook still smoldering. I didn't need to. "Why?" I turned to look at him. "Because you think I've gone soft? That I'm not angry anymore?" He stepped forward, leaned one hand against the post. "No," he said quietly. "Because you're finally angry at the right thing." That made me go still. "The right thing?" I echoed. "The people who made you believe revenge was the only way to remember her." I looked down. My thumb rubbed the plastic shell of the drive in slow, deliberate circles. "She was erased," I whispered. "Not just forgotten, erased. Like she never mattered. She mattered to you. Not enough to save her. Then save yourself." Those 3 words hit harder than anything he'd said. He wasn't begging. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't even asking for forgiveness. He was offering me a way out of the story I'd been rewriting in blood. "I don't know how to live without this," I said. "Without purpose. Without a target." "You were never the one who pulled the trigger," he said. "You've just been holding the bullet for too long." Silence. Then wind. Then light. The sun began to rise behind the tree line, setting. Fire to the mist like it too had something to burn. I stared at the flash drive again. Once it had felt like justice. Now it felt like grief, not just mine. His too. "I wanted to destroy you," I said. William didn't flinch. "I know. I planned every word, every smile, every night I turned away. I know. And last night." My voice broke, just slightly. "I didn't know if I hated you, or if I hated that I didn't." He stepped toward me, one slow breath at a time. "And what do you feel now?" I looked up, straight into the eyes of the man I'd come to ruin. The man who had let me in, knowing full well I was the threat. I opened my palm. The drive sat there, warm from my skin. Every secret, every piece of evidence, every scar. "I feel," I said, "like this doesn't belong to me anymore." Then I stood, walked back inside. The hearth still glowed, waiting. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the drive into the fire. It didn't scream. It didn't fight. It cracked. Then curled. Then disappeared. Just like a name on a list. Just like my mother's voice. Just like the version of me who thought power was the same as peace. Later, I sat on the rug, legs tucked beneath me, and stared into the flames. I didn't feel absolution. I felt emptied. Not broken, not healed, just real for the first time in years. William came to sit across from me, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. We didn't speak, not because there was nothing to say, but because some truths didn't need repeating. Eventually, he asked, "Do you still want to leave?" I thought about it. About the bags I hadn't packed. About the freedom I thought revenge would give me. "I don't know what I want yet," I said. "But I don't want to want revenge anymore." "That's a start. It's all I have." "No," he said. "You have something more dangerous now." I raised an eyebrow. "What?" He smiled, soft and sad. "A future." We didn't touch. We didn't cry. We just sat beside a fire we both built and chose not to burn each other in. Spring returned like it always did in Vermont, too quietly to be noticed, too stubborn to be stopped. The trees outside had begun to blush green again. The sky stayed open longer. The cold left the corners of the house one hallway at a time, and I stayed. Not because I owed him anything, not because he forgave me, but because I wasn't finished becoming someone new. William didn't ask questions. Not after I burned the drive. Not after I sat across from him at breakfast, my hands still smelling faintly of ash. He poured my tea, jasmine, always, and returned to reading. We lived in a new kind of silence now. Not the silence of secrets, but the silence of knowing. Some days we spoke little. Other days he'd ask about my mother, what she laughed like, what she cooked, how she braided my hair. I told him everything, not all at once, but over time, like string unraveling from a spool. One afternoon I found him in the greenhouse. He was tending to a row of roses, old stubborn ones with thorny stems and reluctant blooms. "You garden?" I asked, surprised. "Sometimes," he said. "They don't expect much from me." I did. He looked up. "You expected me to hurt you?" "I expected to win." "And did you?" I paused. "No." He smiled faintly. Then we both lost something. I began sewing again. Not for purpose, but for rhythm. Fabric steadied my hands. Thread quieted my mind. I mended the ripped collar of his coat. He never mentioned it, but he wore it the next day. That was his way of saying thank you. One night he stood at the foot of my bed, not to enter, not to ask, but to offer. "If you want to leave," he said, "I won't stop you." I met his gaze. "Do you want me to?" He was quiet. Then, "I want you to want to stay." And that was the only answer that mattered. I didn't leave, but I didn't move into his bed either. We built something slower than love. We built trust. Weeks passed. And then, on a Tuesday full of late rain and no plans, I found him sitting alone in the room with the unfinished chessboard. His fingers hovered over the white queen. "You never made her move," I said softly. "No," he said. "But I think it's time." He lifted the piece, placed it forward. A sacrificial move. The kind made not to win the game, but to change the story. That night, I wrote my mother's name in ink again. On the last page of my journal, not as an ending, but as a reintroduction. Sometime. After midnight, I walked into his room without knocking. He looked up from his book. I didn't say anything. I simply climbed into the bed beside him. Not with heat. Not with demand. But with presence. He didn't reach for me. He just turned off the light and let me stay. In the dark, I whispered. If I told you everything again, every lie, every reason I used to have, would you still have said yes? Didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. And I'd say it louder. I swallowed hard. Even if I was only there to ruin you. His hand found mine beneath the sheets. Steady, warm, unshaking. Especially then, he said. Because loving someone who wanted to break me was the first time I knew what it meant to choose it anyway. I cried that night. Not from guilt, not from fear, but from finally putting something down I'd carried too long. In the morning, I sat at the window with my tea and watched the sun lift the fog off the garden. William stood below, sleeves rolled, tending to the roses. He looked up, once, just once. Our eyes met, and we didn't smile. We didn't need to, because this was what forgiveness looked like when no one asked for it. I had come here to bury a man. Instead, I'd buried my vengeance. Buried the part of me that believed revenge could bring peace. Buried the girl who couldn't imagine a future, and what bloomed from that grave was me. I married you to bury you, but you handed me a shovel and waited. And in the end, I didn't dig your grave. I dug my way out. If this story moved you, even just a little, leave a like to let it echo. And if you'd like more quiet, stories that stay with you long after the last word, consider subscribing. Sometimes the softest voices tell the most lasting truths.